and I get to choose what, which topic. So the topic that I'm choosing to talk to you about on the Rebbe Rashab is the Rebbe Rashab's childhood. Okay, that's what I'm doing. Why? I decided. The Rebbe Rashab was 5.5 when his father became a Rebbe. In contrast to what you may think, having a father as a Rebbe is really not a lot of fun. I mean, b'chlal, having a father as a president, it sounds cooler than it is. I don't know how many of you are going to be in touch with children of former presidents, and say, how did it feel to live in the White House? It's really weird. And the weirdest part of it is that you're being followed around by the Secret Service who are protecting you when you're 6 or 7 or 10 or 11. And then, of course, there's the way people look at you. And then there's the relationship itself, If you're the son or a daughter of a Rebbe, there's a lot of expectation, a lot of pressure on you. People just assume you're the son of a Rebbe, then you're the son of a Rebbe. That's hard enough. But then having a father who is that busy with such important things, and realistically speaking, the Rebbe Marash did not get down on the floor and play marbles with the Rebbe Rashab when he was 6. It's not. I don't think that happened. It probably didn't happen when he was 2 either. But having a father at Rebbe is awesome. I mean it in the full use of the word awesome. Not just awesome like we use the word cool, but awesome. It's awe-filled. It's really filled with I don't want to say a dread, a fear, but it's intense. It's awesome. Now, it helps if you're the son of a Rebbe and a Rebbe yourself. The Rebbe Rashab was the son of a Rebbe, but he was also a Rebbe and the father of a Rebbe. So in other words, he had the genes. He was a big neshama. To be the child of a Rebbe and not to be a Rebbe, that's got to be extremely difficult. And the Rebbe Rashab had siblings like that. They were the children of a Rebbe and they weren't Rebbes. The Rebbe Rashab, if you look at the Chabad Rebbes, right, we have 7 Rebbes. About the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, it's impossible to know. But even beginning with the Alter Rebbe, I think you could say that there's 2 types of Rebbes in this aspect, one aspect. Some of our Rebbes, when they were children, played. They played around, they had fun, they got into trouble. Others of our Rebbes were, to use the cliche, they were never children. The Friedrich Rebbe as a child, from what we know, which is basically what he told us, which is how he wants us to perceive him, as a kid he had fun, he played around. So did the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash played around. Did any other of the Rebbes when they were children play around? I don't know, maybe the Tzemach Tzedek. But some of our Rebbes were Pashut so earnest. If you would have seen them as a child, you would have thought there's something wrong with them. Our Rebbe, when he was a baby, had an earnestness about him which was frightening. In other words, if you wouldn't know how big a neshama he was, you would think that he's abused or something. The Rebbe Rashab was like that. The Rebbe Rashab was never a child. He was so earnest as a little kid. Had you seen him, you would have said, what's wrong with him? He was extremely, extremely earnest. And there's a lot of examples for that earnestness. One of them was, he learned as a child that you're supposed to have respect for your older brother and sister. And it's part of the mitzvah of kibbud avayim. So his older brother and sister took full advantage. They were always asking. He was their mishadas. They were making fun of him. They were teasing his gullibility, his naivete, and he was doing a mitzvah. So he was happy, and they were happy. And sometimes they would push and get on his nerves. They would just want to see how far they could push him. They wanted to see if they could get him upset, if he could go out of the kibbud avayim mode. And when they would push him very far, he would never stop respecting them. But he would push and cry that they were cornering him. This was the kind of a child that the Rebbe Rashab was. One of the stories about the Rebbe Rashab's Yireh Shamayim is it's a very, very powerful story. I don't know how old he was, but he was way before Bar Mitzvah. He may have been 7 or 8. Now you have to understand, the Rebbe Marash, his father, lived like he was rich. Everybody thought that Rebbe Marash had investments and he was in business and he made lots and lots of money. He had a lot of money, but he never was in business. The Rebbe Marash Poshet won government lotteries. He won lots of money in lotto. We have now the Rebbe's journal that it says that the Rebbe Marash used to buy lottery tickets, the Tzemach Tzedek used to buy lottery tickets, and they found a pidyon nefesh from the Tzemach Tzedek writing that he hopes that his son will win the lotto. He bought a ticket, his son bought a ticket, and he davened to the Eibusha that the Rebbe Marash should win, because the Rebbe Marash had an avodah of Ashirus. It's a whole story which is not part of the Rebbe Rashab's life. It's a part of the Rebbe Marash's life. But the Rebbe Rashab, as a child, lived in a home with a lot of harchava. It was a very comfortable home. When he became a Rebbe, there was no money left. But when he was a young boy, there was lots of money. And one of the symptoms of that was that the Rebbe Marash would buy fabric. Nobody bought, you didn't go to a store and buy clothes. You bought material. And you went to the tailor made it for you. This was normal. The difference between an expensive outfit and a cheap outfit was the fabric, how much it costed. The Rebbe Marash traveled and he used to buy the nicest fabric, the best fabric. He'd bring it home. And the Rebbe Snifka would call the tailor. The tailor would come to the house. He would measure her. He would make whatever it was that they called what do they call it? A pattern, an outline, and he would take the material away. He'd make the outfit, he'd bring it back, he would fit it, and then he would, how you fit. I mean, you girls know better than I about fashion. I'm a big gone in men's fashion, but I don't understand women's fashion so well. Anyway, but it was expensive fabric. Expensive fabric means that even the leftover fabric is worth a lot of money. And there's halachas for those. We learn Shleisha Brachim Rambam. You guys learn Sefer HaMitzvahs. You don't know what you're getting away with, okay? But Shleisha Brachim Rambam is intense. It's a lot. Ooh, it's a lot. So one of the halachas is a tailor or even a cleaner, someone who cleans your clothes. If when you clean clothes, some of the fabric falls off, who does it belong to? There's different halachas. Depending on how much it is and which part of the fabric it is, do you have to give it back to the original owner, or are you able to keep it? There's dinim that govern what you would call waste product, you understand? But if it's a substantial piece of fabric and it's very expensive, you have to return it. So the tailor came to the house with an outfit which he had sewed for the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Tzendivki, for the Rebbe Rashab's mother, and he was fitting her. How old was the Rebbe Rashab? Let's say he was 6. The Rebbe Rashab put his hand in the tailor's jacket pocket and pulled out a huge swath of leftover material. Now, what was the tailor thinking? He's going to keep it or he's going to return it? He had it in his pocket. So was he going to return it? He just didn't get around to it. Was he going to keep it and hope he can get away with it? Was he wanted to see how the Rebbetzin would act, which he asked him for the material? We don't know what was going on in the tailor's head. We do know this, that when the Rebbe Rashab pulled the material out of his pocket, he turned red, crimson, he turned fiery red. He was very embarrassed because it looked like he was a ganef. He probably wasn't. He may have been, I don't know, but he had it in his pocket, didn't keep it in his house. He turned fiery red. And the Rebbe Tzendivka turned to the Rebbe Rashab, who was very little, and said, Cook, just for Shem Tayyid, look what you just did, you embarrassed the Jew. The Rebbe Tzendivka was a big tzidkonis. I mean, you know the Rebbe Tzendivka. She's the Hayem Yem of Yud Shvat, better to eat for davening. She was a big tzidkonis. She was very frum. She didn't have an easy life. She was a Yesema. She was an orphan from home. She was a big tzaddikus. And she raised the children, and she told her son, the Rebbe Rashab, you embarrassed her. The Rebbe felt terrible, the Rebbe Rashab. A few days later, the Rebbe Rashab went into his father, the Rebbe Marash, in quotes, to Yechidus. He was a 6-year-old. He went to Yechidus to his father, the Rebbe. His father was already the Rebbe, 7. I don't know how old he was. He was a little boy. And he started to cry. He was very upset. And he said to his father, what do I have to do to correct the fact that I embarrassed the Jew? So the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Marash had a pretty good sense of Ruach HaKodesh. Mistama, he knew what the Rebbe Rashab did. But he said to his son, what did you do? If you want a ticket for embarrassing a Jew, I need to know what the embarrassment was. And the Rebbe Rashab wouldn't tell his father. Because in order to tell his father, he would have to repeat that the tailor did not return the material. And there's a possibility the tailor was going to steal it. So the Rebbe Marash told his father, his son, if you don't tell me what you did, I can't give you a tikkun tshuva. And the Rebbe Rashab started to cry. Is it not enough that I embarrassed that you have to speak Lashon Hara also? And he wouldn't tell his father. We know this story from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Mistamed the Rebbe Tzedivka to details. But he wouldn't tell his father what he did. Mistamed the Rebbe Marash came home, which was like the next room, you understand, and the Rebbe Tzedivka told him the Maaseh. But he was very oiskehit, very, very erlach as a child. He had an earnestness about him which was extraordinary. He had an older brother. The Razor Zamanan. He really had two older brothers, I think. I'm not sure, because one of the boys in that house, his name was Rebbe Sender, he passed away at the age of 8. He was the neshama of the Alter Rebbe that came in to complete the 8 years that it lost, because of the Alter Rebbe passed away 8 years before his time to defeat Napoleon. I can't. It just gives me a headache to think 8 years of the Alter Rebbe. What 8 more years of the Alter Rebbe to defeat Napoleon? It tells you what kind of klipa Napoleon was. So that Rebbe Marash had a son whose name was Rebbe Sender. He passed away at the age of 8, and they wrote on his matzeva, Hayelad HaTzadik. You never write about a child HaTzadik, because until Bat and Bat Mitzvah, you don't really get the neshama. But he was a wunder. The problem is we're not sure where he was there were 6 children in that house. We're not sure if he was second or third or fourth. It's very difficult to know because of the different contradictory documents. But he had an older brother, who was a gadol bigdei, who was a great, great man. In another universe, in a parallel universe, he would actually have been a Rebbe. And the 2 children played. They were both sons of the Rebbe. Some went to Cheder. They had Malamdim. I don't know how many friends they had. The whole Lubavitch was how many kids. But they played together. They were children of the Rebbe. They played together. What game do kids play? Huh? Does anybody know what games do kids play? Kids play what they see the adults doing. That's the game that kids play. In the modern world, they've introduced this concept called toys. And toys are supposed to keep kids busy with whatever is going to make the manufacturers the most money. But if you leave kids alone, you don't give them fake toys, they will do what adults are doing. They grew up in the house of a Rebbe, so all their games were Rebbe and Chassid. This was their world. But obviously the older brother was the Rebbe and the younger brother was the Chassid. That's only fair, yeah? It would not turn out that way, right? But that's how it was when they were children. And it's interesting because the Rebbe Rashab didn't mind being the Chassid at all. He was very happy to be subordinate to his older brother. The Rebbe has a journal. You know that our Rebbe has a diary. We wrote down things that the previous Rebbe told him in private, and they're now printed. After Gimel Tammuz, they published the Rebbe's journal, including what's called the Rishimas Hayuman. The journal is Torah, a lot of it's Torah. But some of it is Pashat, stories that Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe. And one of the things in that journal is that when the Rebbe Rashab was a little boy, he used to say, Ich will nicht sein a Yebbe. I don't want to be a Yebbe. Because a Yebbe is ein, Chassidim sein asach. Because a Yebbe is only one, and the Chassidim are many. I want to be a Chassid. And of course, all those who don't want the job end up with the job. So what's new? So they used to play Rebbe and Chassid. So the older brother was the Yebbe, and the younger brother was the Chassid. Now, so first of all, the first story, which is probably the most famous, is that the Rebbe Rashab was very tall. And his older brother was much shorter than him. And he was very self-conscious. So whenever they would play, they would walk on a hill. The Razal would walk higher, and the Rebbe Rashab would walk lower, so that he should be higher than his younger brother, who was taller than him. And if they were ever walking on a flat, they would make a hole in the ground, so the Rebbe Rashab would be lower, and he would be higher. He was very self-conscious of his height. The Rebbe Marash once saw this. Their father, the Rebbe, once looked out the window and he saw the kids playing, and he saw how the older brother is literally diminishing his younger brother. He was breaking his self-esteem. He was diminishing him, so he should be higher. And the Rebbe Marash called the older brother with the younger brother together. They came into the room, and obviously when they were together, the older brother was shorter and the younger brother was taller. And he told the older brother to climb up on a chair. The older brother asked to get up on a chair. So he got up on a chair, and the Rebbe Marash said, Otazeh, this is how you do it. You don't put the other person down. You raise yourself up. That's it. You don't put the other person down. You raise yourself up. So they used to play Rebbe and Chassid. And there's some stories, and I don't remember all of them offhand. But the Rebbe Rashab used to come to his older brother as a Chassid to a Rebbe with earnest questions. And if he had problems in his own avodah, you're talking about an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, he would come to his brother, the Rebbe, and ask him for a tikkun. How do I fix this mistake? How do I fix this mistake? They were playing a game, but the game was playing out real issues. So one time the Chassid came to the Rebbe and he complained that he has this chassadim, this chassadim, this chassadim, and so his brother answered him. And the Rebbe Rashab said, no, you're a bad Rebbe. I'm not playing. He said, what did I do wrong? Yes, because he gave an answer. He says, a Rebbe, a Rebbe, before he answers, he sighs. It hurts him. He takes it personally. You just answered me like Google, like ATM. That's not a Rebbe. You have to be into it. This was their game. And there are known stories of specific questions that the Chassid asked the Rebbe, but I do not remember them offhand. But it's part of the Rebbe Rashab's childhood. Another story, which is printed in the back of the Tillim, which we know, that one day the Chassid, the Rebbe Rashab, came to his Rebbe, his older brother, the Razor, with a question. What's the difference between a Yid and a Goy? What's the difference? This was the question. So the Chassid came to his Rebbe. The Chassid was 7.5, the Rebbe was 9, or the Chassid was 5, and the Rebbe was 7.5, 6.5. I don't know what ages they were, but they were not bar mitzvah. And he says to his older brother, so the older brother answered him. He gave him something exotic and lofty, a Jew without the whatever he told him. Now it was the summertime. And the Rebbe Marash had what you and I would call a gazebo. It was very hot. He had an outdoor little hut. The whole hut was screens, you understand? It was very open, very airy. And it was built under trees, so it was very comfortable. And the Rebbe Marash used to sit in this hut. That's how he would do his thing in the hut. So he overheard the kids' conversation. He overheard the children playing. So he called the two of them into his gazebo, and they came. And when they both came, he asked them what the game was. So they explained to him that the game is that the Chassid just asked the Rebbe Rashab asked his older brother, what's the difference between a Yid and a Goy? And what did you answer? So he gave whatever exotic answer he gave. So when they finished this whole exchange, the Rebbe Marash said to the Rebbe Rashab, who was younger, go and call Ben Zion the Misharis. There was a man in the house whose name was Ben Zion. If I am not incorrect, Ben Zion the Misharis was from the Cantonisten, from the kids that were taken away to 25 years of service in the Russian army. He was stolen out of the army, but he couldn't go back to his family because they'd arrest him. So he stayed on Lubavitch, and he became a Misharis. He's a Pashto Yid, a sincere Jew, a very simple Jew. He worked at the house of the Rebbe. And whatever he did, I don't know what he did, but he served in the house. So the Ben Zion the Misharis comes in, and the Rebbe Marash says to Ben Zion the Misharis, Rebbe Zion, has gegessen? You ate? He says, yeah. This is in the back of the Tillim. I read that story 100 times. You know why? Because I had a father who used to daven Barichas Shabbos, and we were stuck in shul till 2, 3 in the afternoon in the dark room. So we used to, my brother and I, either we played Chumash or we read the back of the Tillim. But the Hebrew we didn't understand, so we had to look for the Yiddish stories. This story is in Yiddish mostly, so we read the same stories over. I know these stories by heart. The Hebrew lines I never understood, which was a problem, because the Hebrew and Yiddish is intermittent, and I was embarrassed to ask anybody. But Yiddish I knew. Be'erzin, I was gegessen, you ate it, yeah. Has good gegessen? Did you eat well? He said, yeah. He said, Zat Baruch Hashem, I'm satisfied, thank God. Was hast du gegessen? Why did you eat? There's a leben. It's a funny question. That's why did you eat? So he answered, I want to live. Was willst du leben? Why do you want to live? So he answered, I'm about to daven and learn and serve Hashem. And v'nenach ha-mishoris, the mishoris sighed. Now I didn't know what v'nenach meant because it was Hebrew. I could have asked my father, but that would have been bad, yeah? So for years and years and years, I didn't know. I knew it meant something, not gishmak, but I had no idea. He sighed. He expressed displeasure with himself. And the Rebbe Marash told him, Kent's gain, you can go and send in the goy who worked in the house, whose name I forgot. Ivan, let's say. Anyway, the goy comes in, and he spoke Yiddish. He was 100% a goy, but he spoke Yiddish. He worked for Yidden his whole life. And the Rebbe Marash says to him, has gegessen, did you eat? He says, yeah. Has good gegessen, did you eat well? He says, yeah. And he smacked his lips from the breakfast they had that morning. Was hast du gegessen? Why did you eat? So he answered, I should be able to live. And why do you want to live? Why do I want to live? I should be able to drink a little mashke and verbeißen with a delicious piece of good herring. And he showed the joy of drinking the bramfen, and he showed in his mind he was right then drinking mashke and eating herring, and he was enjoying it all over again. And the Rebbe Marash said to him, Kensken, you can go. And then he turned to the boys. He says, you want to between a good and a goy. It's not so exotic, it's not so lofty, it's very plain. This is one of the stories. This is one of the stories of their childhood. There is a story which is very compelling. It's a very powerful story. And it's in the Rebbe's journal. In other words, the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe this Maise. And it's printed. Today we all have access to it. Should we have access? Shouldn't we have access? That's not my department. Believe me, I'm very happy we do. I have no tightness to the people who published it, but this is extremely personal. It says in the Rebbe's journal that the Alter Rebbe gave the Mittler Rebbe a gartel. The Alter Rebbe had 3 sons. Mittler was the oldest. He gave the Mittler Rebbe a gartel, but only the Mittler Rebbe. He didn't give it to the other boys. The Alter Rebbe also gave a gartel to the Tzemach Tzedek. And he didn't give it to any of his grandchildren. He thought it was his grandchild. The Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons. He gave a gartel to one of his 7 sons, the youngest, the Rebbe Marash. Now the story with the Tzemach Tzedek giving a gartel to the Rebbe Marash was that in Lubavitch there was a cheder, a private cheder that belonged to the family, that only the Rebbe's children participated. In other words, Tzemach Tzedek had 7 children, 7 sons and 2 daughters, a lot of people. They all lived in Lubavitch mostly. And they all had children and grandchildren. They all went to the same cheder, the same malamdim. The malamdim were big chassidim and big lomdim. They were great men. And they taught the children Torah. And the Tzemach Tzedek said to the malamid, Ich trach geben a gartel. I'm thinking to give a gartel to the youngest son, to the Rebbe Marash. So the malamid said to the Tzemach Tzedek, I taught all of your children, and you didn't give a gartel to any of the others. It was 7 boys. He was the youngest. So the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, answered, Ba uns ist nicht in Kashus, und af uns ist nicht in Kashus. Die wir verstehen, verstehen, die wir verstehen nicht, verstehen nicht. By us there are no questions, and on us there are no questions. Those who understand, understand. Those who don't understand, don't understand. And in the presence of this Malamed, the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, gave the Rebbe Marash, that's the 4th Lubavitcher Rebbe, was named Rebbe Shmuel, a gartel. Fast forward about 20 years, maybe more. One day, maybe for sure more, 30 years, 25 years. The Rebbe Marash calls him the same Malamed, who was now teaching his son, the Rebbe Rashab. And he says to him, I'm thinking to give him a gartel, the Rebbe Rashab. So he says, but you have an older son, and you didn't give him a gartel. And the Rebbe Marash said the same exact words. Ba uns ist nicht in Kashus, af uns ist nicht in Kashus. Die was verstehen, verstehen. Die was verstehen, nicht verstehen nicht. By us there are no questions. On us there are no questions. Those who understand, understand. And those who don't understand, don't understand. And in the presence of this Malamed, he gave the Rebbe Rashab a gartel. So this Malamed had the schus to see, there's a lashon in the Sichos. The pach hashemen. The pach hashemen, the jug of oil, with which the Baal Shem Tov anointed the Alter Rebbe used to anoint the Rebbeim after him. There's an expression in the Sichos that it wasn't a physical jug of oil, it was a spiritual idea. But there's a lashon in the Sichos that the jug of oil which the Baal Shem Tov used to anoint the Alter Rebbe then used to anoint the Nesiach Chabad L'Dei Yisrael, the Rebbeim in each generation. They all had brothers, they all had cousins. But the Rebbe gave this gartel, gave this pach hashemen only to that child or grandchild who, to use the expression which really is so overwhelming, it should make you fall. The neshama klolis. A Rebbe is not just smarter and bigger, he's a whole nother business, a general soul. The end of that story is, the Frierdiker Rebbe told the Rebbe the whole story, how the Alter Rebbe gave the Mittler Rebbe, gave the Tzemach Tzedek, and Tzemach Tzedek gave the Rebbe Marash. And the end of the story is that one day, the Rebbe Rashab said to his mother, the Rebbe Tzedivke, Ich trach geben a gartel. I'm thinking to give the Frierdiker Rebbe a gartel. So the Rebbe Tzedivke said to her son, Atazevi the tata, did you give it the way your father gave you a gartel? And the Rebbe Rashab said, Atazevi the tata. We mentioned, he was saying to his mother, this is a Rebbe. Frierdiker was 11. Atazevi tata. So the Rebbe Tzedivke bought silk. And she made the gartel herself. She weaved it herself. And when the gartel was finished, she gave it to the Frierdiker Rebbe. I'm sorry, I just cry very easy at my old age. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, what's this? So she says, I'm giving you a gartel the way your grandfather gave your father. If you want to know what it means, go and ask him. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was 11. He ran with the gartel to his father, the Rebbe Rashab. He knocked on his father's door. And the Rebbe Rashab was in a good mood. So when he opened the door, he saw his son. He said to him, Rabbi Yasha, he had nicknames, different nicknames for the Rebbe. And he said something very, very affectionate. What would you like? And the Rebbe Rayatz put out the gatto. I'm sorry. So the Rebbe Rashab became extremely serious, and he took him into his room. The conversation is not written down. What happened after that, we don't know. This is a Nesius, it's a mystical equivalent of anointing, A Rebbe is not just an availability. I'm speaking tonight in Manhattan in a Chabad house. And the guy is telling me, I'm speaking to non-Lubavitcher people. They want to understand why there's no Rebbe, no new Rebbe, It's not like you have a vacancy, so you fill it. The Eibishter makes a Rebbe. It's straight from Atzim Azavos Ein Tzav Baruch Hu. This is so serious and so high. It either is or it isn't, But the Rabbeim, the Alter Rebbe gave the Mittel Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe gave the Tzemach Tzedek, the Tzemach Tzedek gave the Rebbe Marash, and so on. When our Rebbe got married, the Frierdiker Rebbe tied him in a gartel. And he also said, he didn't say those exact words, but he said something to the effect that the gartel is binding, it means something. So the Rebbe Rashab had a boy, got a gartel from his father when his older brother didn't get. Which leads to a very interesting and involved parsha, okay? And that is, it's very hard to be a Rebbe and have an older brother when you're 10. Why? Because you don't want to look greater than your younger brother. You don't want to make your older brother look bad. Now, you have to understand that Azor, the Rebbe Rashab's older brother, had an infinite mind. He was brilliant. He was extremely smart. I mean, the story that they tell, whether it's true or not, I don't know because I wasn't there, They say that 15 people sat down with 15 newspapers in 15 different languages and simultaneously read the paper. And when they were finished, the Rebbe Razor repeated all 15 things. 15 people speaking at the same time in 15 different languages. So you have to understand all those languages, and he gave it back. He was extremely great. An incredible mind. People used to think he was smarter than the Rebbe Rashab. Somebody once said to the Rebbe Marash, your older son is smarter than your younger son, and the Rebbe Marash said back, but the younger son is deeper. The younger son is deeper. So the Rebbe Rashab, the younger brother who, one of his Mishagasan was Kibbud Aveim, as I mentioned, he had to figure out a way to get the chinuch and the hadracha that he needed from his father as a Rebbe to be without embarrassing his older brother, which was a very tricky thing. So they developed a pattern. It probably started around the time he was bar mitzvah, maybe even before, that the Rebbe Rashab would go into his father in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, when the Razor was sleeping. And he would spend a lot of time with his father, a lot of time, personal time. And it allowed for the Rebbe Rashab to get what he needed from his father, the Rebbe Marash, and without his older brother even realizing that was going on. Mom, he had no idea. So it didn't hurt his older brother. The Rebbe Marash's day started very early. It says in the Sichos, the first Bossi Lagana, the Rebbe mentioned it, but the Rebbe Marash's Zeit given the Rebbe Marash valued every second. He was very, very precise about time. So everything was early. When he said Banacht at night was like 12 o'clock. Fatog was 2 o'clock in the morning, in the free was 4 o'clock. Everything was very early. And his father would tell him, Kumarayin, come in at this and this hour. The Rebbe Rashab already knew the codes, Banacht is 12 o'clock, Fatog is 2 o'clock, in the free is 4 o'clock, and so on. Noch David is 7 o'clock. Everything was very early. And he would go into his father, the Rebbe Rashab would go into his father, and they would talk about what a Rebbe needs to give over to a Rebbe. It was done very quietly. And they had the time that they needed for the Rebbe Marash to be madrich the Rebbe Rashab. As the story would play out, we have 10 more minutes, right? I have 10 more minutes, correct? Yeah. The Rebbe Marash passed away very young. When the Rebbe Marash passed away, the Rebbe Rashab wasn't yet 22. And he needed his father. The Rebbe Marash passed away early. He gave away a number of years to defeat the pogroms in Russia. He was supposed to probably live another 5 years. And the Rebbe Rashab missed his father terribly. When the Rebbe Marash passed away, the Rebbe Rashab was devastated by it. But he had that time before his father had passed away, so to speak, he took advantage of it. So one of the one of the most poignant stories is that the Rebbe Rashab was by his father, the Rebbe Marash, whatever time it was, Banacht, Fartog, in the free, whatever the hours were. And they were talking about neshamas, about Jewish souls, Yiddish neshamas. And the Rebbe Marash is sort of musing, Azeya neshama, Prata neshama, Kala neshama. There's different kinds of souls, There's personal souls, there's general souls, there's different kinds of neshamas, big ones, little ones, round ones, square ones. I mean, neshamas don't have a shape, but you know the point. And he says to him, there's neshamas pratius, there's regular neshamas, and then there's neshamas klolos, there's general neshamas. The Rebbe Rashab was 12. And then the Rebbe Marash says, as a off the cuff, Dai neshama is von zweiten Zug. Your neshama is from the second group, meaning you have the neshama of a Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab told this story to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And when he told the story to the Rebbe, he added, that when my father told me those words, that my neshama, I'm going to be a Rebbe, a pain shot up his back from his waist to his shoulder that did not leave him for the rest of his life. He had chronic back pain from the stress of being told before his bar mitzvah, that he's destined to be a Rebbe. So then the Rebbe Rashab said to his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe,